Good morning and happy Friday. This week we've been studying 1 Samuel chapter 6. After God has defended his honor against the pagan Philistines and their false god Dagon, and sent plagues to compel them to return his ark to his people, they finally relent. Chapter 6 explains their decision to return it, seeking advice from their religious influencers on how best to do that, and then carrying out their plan. The ark is returned, and God's people receive it with joy, but then dishonor it again and suffer the consequences of their sin again. They lament, mourn, grieve for God's judgment upon the 70 who defiled God's holy ark. But do they lament for their own sin? Well, we'll find out next week as we move further into chapter 7. But here in chapter 6, we've read the text and gleaned some helpful lessons for us. This morning, I'd like to review them. In verse 1, we are informed that the ark of the Lord was in the country of the Philistines 7 months. Now, 7 is the number for perfection, so whether it was an actual 7 months, which it probably was, it was the perfect amount of time. Because lesson 1, God's timing is perfect. We don't have God's eternal perspective, so it can sometimes appear that God is unaware of the time frame for situations, that he moves too slow, or gets behind, or forgets. But in truth, none of that is true. He has the perfect perspective, and our part, our faith, is to trust him when we have to wait on him for answers, for his hand to move, to provide, to heal, to save. For today, let's all agree to wait upon the Lord with faith and patience, to trust him that his timing is perfect. In verse 2, the Philistines have decided to return the ark. They want the plagues gone, their suffering to end. But they aren't sure how to return it properly. So, the Philistines called for their priests of their own god Dagon, and the diviners, the sorcerers who worked with chemicals, and the soothsayers who consulted the dead. That's what they did. But we don't consult the ungodly. Rather, we consult God, because lesson 2, God's wisdom is essential. We need to understand as much as we can God's will and his ways. So we make our prayer requests to him. We ask him for wisdom. We look to his word for guidance. We seek out mature believers who will impart godly direction that inspires our faith. Interestingly, when the influencers give their advice, they speak in verse 4 of a guilt offering. So even pagans have a measure of understanding the importance of admitting guilt and seeking to appease a God. For us, we read that, and it reminds us again, lesson 3, God's gospel. It's central. Jesus Christ's death on the cross for our sin was our guilt offering. We are right with God because of Christ's atoning death and victorious resurrection. In verse 8, the influencers remind the Philistines of what happened to the Egyptians when God was dealing with them. They rhetorically ask in verse 8, "Why should you harden your hearts as the Egyptians? They only prolonged the inevitable, because," lesson 4, "God's plans will prevail." Refusing God's demands through Moses didn't work for them, so it likely won't work for you. In essence, give up, give the ark back with an offering in the hopes that the God of Israel will relent and remove the plagues from among you. Well, when the ark is returned to Israel, verse 13, when they saw the ark, they rejoiced. Because lesson 5, God's glory brings joy. When we see God glorified, we rejoice. It delights our hearts. He delights our hearts. In response, verse 14, they offered the cows as a burnt offering to the Lord, because lesson 6, God's provisions inspire offerings. When God blesses us, we want and need to express thanks. So we give out of gratitude. for what God has given to us, the ways He has provided for us. Then, verse 15, the men offered offerings and sacrificed sacrifices. Beyond the 2 cows sent by the Philistines, they presented their own offerings and sacrifices. It's a great picture and reminder, lesson 7, God's grace inspires our worship and service. The ark was returned to them. They didn't go and get it, and we didn't go and get our salvation. It was imparted to us, a gift of grace. And it was not because of our goodness deserving it, and it's not secured because of our good works after that. It's all by God's grace. So because of what we've been given eternally, we express our gratitude through our worship and our works, our service. Today, worship the Lord and serve Him in gratitude for all that He has done for you and given to you.
I was a wretch. I remember who I was. I was lost. I was blind. I was running out of time. Sin separated. The breach was far too wide. But from the far side of the chasm, you held me in your side. So you made a way across the great divide, left behind